All right, everybody. Today we have a special guest. His name is Victor Antonio. And Victor earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and MBA, and he has built over 20-year career as a top sales executive and president of global sales and marketing for a $420 million company. As a VP of international sales in a Fortune 500, $3 billion corporation at the time, he was selected from over 500 sales managers to join the President's Advisory Council for Excellence in Sales and Management. He has shared the stage with top speakers like Zig Ziglar, Damon John, Rudy Giuliani, Paul Otellini, or John May. He's the author of 13 books on sales and motivation, recently launched Sales Velocity Academy with over 300 videos. But he also published a book, Deus Ex Machina, How Artificial Intelligence is Changing the World of Selling. So welcome, Victor. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your day.
My pleasure, man. Super excited to be with you, man.
All right. So first of all, I want to dive really deep into the topic of objection handling. And many people, maybe you've heard about this, maybe not. And you kind of created a really good system. And I've read your ebook, I think, or one of your materials. I've been following you for over 4 years, I think. So I've read a lot. And first of all, let's first give some context to these guys. Not everybody's in sales. So what exactly is an objection? Give us some examples of an objection that can happen in the B2B sales process.
Well, an objection is a reason why the customer doesn't want to move forward or advance the sale. And so when you look at objection, there's typically two categories. There's the stall, and then there's a true objection. Now, a stall may be, I'm just trying to get rid of you. I don't really want your product. An objection is a real objection. This is the reason I'm not buying. So there's stalls and objections. And most people always talk about objections. And the key is always that if it's a stall, let's identify it as a stall. It's just an excuse. They're never going to buy from you. So why waste your time? And a real objection is let's figure out why they don't want to buy it. Then let's figure out how to overcome that objection.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is super important to understand which one is the real concern and which one is kind of a fake objection, or how would you call it? So how do you actually separate those two? How can you really tell on a sales call? Maybe this is a discovery call, but maybe even later on in the sales process, how do you differentiate between this is fake or this is real?
You have to ask, a key qualifying question. Everybody has a key qualifying question. So for example, if somebody says, I can't afford that right now, right? I can't afford that right now. And then I would say this, if I can find a way to make this affordable, would you move forward or would you still be interested? Now they have to say yes or no. I just said if I can make it affordable. So now I'm really qualifying. Is that a real objection that you can't afford it? Because if I can make it affordable, guess what? Are you in or out? And that'll tell you everything you need to know. If you're selling in B2B, someone says, right now we're interested in the product, but maybe next quarter. And I'll say something like this, Mr. Customer. A lot of customers tell me next quarter. That's either because they're interested or they're not interested. I'll make that option for you. Which one is it? And that's how and it goes, no, and they'll say, no, Victor, we're interested. Now's not a good time. And then I believe them more, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. That requires quite a lot of confidence, right? Because if you imagine a typical maybe tech founder, they don't come from the sales background. So maybe they kind of feel, oh, I can't really put them, like on this, like on the spot, exactly. So maybe for me, for example, I look for these things in sales calls. I look for these objections. I want to fish them out before we move forward. So I love it when I hear something like that, like we can't afford it or it's not the right time. I always love those things, and then I try to kind of rebuttal them. But what you've just mentioned, your process of overcoming that objection, or how do you want to call it?
Right.
Can we go kind of through your system, because you've developed this system called blocking objections, if I'm not mistaken, right, which is all about basically raising the objection before the customer has a chance to verbalize it. And so let's first look at the philosophical aspect of this. Why is this important? Why not just wait for them to raise it?
Okay, so let's handle, because there was a couple of statements in there I just want to make sure we get clear. So I came from a technical background. So if somebody's listening to this and goes, I come from a technical background, I'm not in sales, Victor, I don't feel comfortable. And as you're listening to this, remember Bruce Lee, the martial artist? Bruce Lee says something interesting. When it came to inventing his own style, he invented his own style because he couldn't find anything that fit. And he said something like this: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and then add what is uniquely yours. Let me say it again, because this is really how you should sell in today's market. As you're listening to me or our conversation, those listening, remember, absorb what is useful, something that works for you. Discard what isn't. You say, I can't use that. That's fine. And then you add what is uniquely yours. So I gave you 2 examples of how I would overcome an objection or qualify an objection, right? As you're listening to this, ask yourself, how would I do it? How would I say it that would make me feel comfortable? So don't try to use my words. Find a phrase or phrases that fit your style. That's the first thing I would say to people. Now, having said that, to your question, there's the old school thinking is blocking objections, which I just gave you examples of. How to block objection. The customer raises the objection, and your job is to qualify if it's a real objection and then overcome that objection. And people are real uncomfortable with that approach. By the way, so am I. I don't like that approach because it's too confrontational. Now, I came up with a process called blocking objections, which means you preempt the objection. You raise, as you pointed out, you raise the objection before they do. Now let's go to the psychology of this. There's a couple of guys named Morton and Deutsch did a study. And by the way, can you provide them a link of where they can download my book?
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. And then in that book, I described the study. Now, here's the deal, and keep this in mind that what you're about to hear is really powerful if you really grab it. And that is that once a customer verbalizes an objection, they've taken a mental position, which means you're less likely to change their mind. Now, if me, the seller, can verbalize the objection for them, then they won't retreat. I still have a way of changing their mind. Let's go through it. So make sure everybody says it's a 4-step process. First, you raise the objection. Then you offer to resolve the objection. You demonstrate something, and then you tie it down. I'll repeat it again. Raise the objection, offer to resolve it, demo something, and then tie it down. And I'll explain each one. All right. Let's say that you're walking in. Since this is B2B, let's think of an enterprise solution. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and let's say you're selling some type of SaaS product, right? And let's say it's a CRM, right? It's a CRM. And they're going to say, they're going to say, we already use our own in-house CRM. Now, yours is better, but they use their own in-house CRM. So now, the last thing you want to do is wait for the customer to go, Victor, that's great, but we have our own CRM. Why would we want to use yours? We're fine. And see, they've raised the objection. Now you as a salesperson find yourself in that defensive position. Like, and you start like, well, here's why, here's our features, here's our benefits, here's our advantage, here's our gains, here's the quality we provide, you go through all that. But the customer's already taken a position. Now, that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is that they're going to come at you with that objection. So what you want to do from the front of the room, or as you're talking one-on-one across the table, you want to say, Mr. Customer, I know that you currently use your own in-home solution, and I get that. Okay, I raised the objection. Now, let's pause right there. Because I raised the objection, that means I control the objection. But let's look at what the customer's thinking. Well, I'm glad he brought it up because I was going to bring it up anyway. But because he didn't verbalize it, he didn't say it, or she didn't speak it, it's still in their head. And as long as it remains in their head, you can change their mind. Now, so you raise the objection, then you offer to resolve it. So, Mr. Customer, I know that you're currently using an in-house system. And I'll just use this phrase. But if I can show you how ours can probably help you become more efficient and close more deals, would you be open to that? And what do you think they're going to say? They're going to say, well, yeah, because who would say no to closing more deals? If I can show you how our system will help you close more deals faster than what you have today, would you be open to that? And they're going to say, yeah, great. Now you move into the demo phase. Let me show you how this works. And then you demo that. And maybe that's where you highlight your features, your benefits, your advantages and gains. And then you tie it down by saying something like this. By the way, when I say tie down, you're tying down the objection. You say something like this.
You're not closing a deal. You're tying down the objection.
That is correct. So most people, you often hear the word tie down as you tie down the sale. I'm not talking about tie down the sales. I'm talking about tie down the objections. And I'll explain why in just a little bit, that phrase. So then I would say, based on what I've shown you, can you now see how our solution has more features and functionalities to help you close more deals? And they're going to say, yeah. And if they say no, they have to explain themselves. Most likely, if you do it right, they're going to say yes. And what you've just done is you've closed that objection. You've tied it down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind that in any presentation you do, in any sales pitch you do, by the way, you don't have to be in sales to use this. You can be an engineer going to your manager wanting more money for a budget, right? You got to go get more money for some project you want to work on. Keep in mind that the person you're selling to typically has 5 to 7 objections. Typically 5 to 7 objections. There's no more than that. That's it. Typically 5 to 7 objections. Now, if you know what those 5 to 7 objections are, and you walk in there prepared to tie them all down, what you will do is you will reduce the resistance throughout the meeting. And that is how you use the system I call response block selling. Mm-hmm. Raise the objection, tie it down, then go to the next objection and tie it down.
Got it. So I'm going to use a live example because I like this. And
sure.
we have a lot of agency owners listening. So I'm going to give you a role play and you tell me how I did it. So a lot of time what happens.
I'm under pressure. I'm under pressure. I'm ready for you, man. Bring it on.
So I'm going to talk from the perspective of a founder of a software house, and they have developers that they sell to other companies that they can build software for SaaS products or something like that. So
let me get this straight. So let me actually understand. So you're a company and you have
digital agency, or it can be even marketing agency or a software house, anything kind of service based, right?
Okay. And, I just want to be clear. So I have a service house, right? And I'll call them consultants or experts.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to do is sell my consultant experts into a company to help them do whatever they're going to do.
Exactly. It can be any IT project or anything, because that's usually a lot of people listen to this. So I'm going to go into it. So let's do it. What I believe is the biggest objection is this. Mr. Customer, I already understand that you have your own in-house software development team as every other company. You have your back-end, your front-end developers. But if I can show you a way that you can save over 80% on time on software delivery, would you be open to listening to me how we did that for another company in your space in a form of case study perhaps? And then if they say sure, then instead of a demo, because there's no product, I can show them a case study of how we implemented the system with other people in a very similar space, in a very similar industry. And tie down might be something like, based on what you've sold, would you be up for another meeting? Because this is complex sales. Probably it's not going to be, closed at that time. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of that approach for like services businesses? I just freestyled, of course, but
no, good freestyling, but excellent freestyling, man. You passed. That's great freestyling. So can we just take one step back and then we'll analyze what you just did. So the first step in any presentation is to figure out what those 5 objections are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right? So step number 1 is list out 5 to 7 objections clients typically give you. The first one you highlighted is, we already have people here. Why do I need you? Mm-hmm. Right? That's really the objection. So what I would do is I would write that down as my objection. I already have people. Why do I need you? Right? This is for those listening who have not seen the response block selling. Now that I have that objection, now I build my structure. And what you said, Mr. Customer, I know you currently have in-house resources to do X, Y, Z, right? Whatever it may be. I know you're going to say, okay, you've raised the objection, you're controlling the conversation. Then you said, if I can show you how I can save you 80% of whatever it may be, would you be open to it? I'm simplifying what you said, right? And that's perfect, right? And then they're going to say, yeah, sure, show me how you're going to save me money. And then the third piece is you demo, and as you pointed out, you do a case study. That's the demo phase. Let me show you what we did with a company similar to yours and how we helped them save money. And then you can really dig into that. And then you can say, again, based on what I've shown you, can you now see how using us will save you some time and money? And they're going to say, yeah, I guess I can see that. And that's the way forward with that. Mm-hmm. Then you take the next objection. What other objection do you think they'll have? By the way, you did excellent. I mean, you can play with your wording a little bit. I would, on the offer to resolve, which is step 2, remember, raise the objection. on the offer to resolve, you just got to tighten it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Make it shorter. But I know you were going off the top of your head. So, that's so I think that was excellent for off the top of your head. Trust me, I've seen people fail at this. You did exceptionally well.
Thanks.
So that would be one objection. Then the other objection would be, what do you think another objection would be in this scenario? What else would they have?
Definitely pricing, because these guys are priced based on the hour. It's super hard to compete. So they can raise an objection saying like, well, I can hire guys from India. Why do I have to hire you? I mean,
Okay,
they are cheaper.
Let's do this. These are the conversations I like, because it's too easy to say, well, it's always about price, Victor. No, it isn't. No, it isn't always about price. Trust me. Let's you and I get into let's say you're talking to the head of IT in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making somebody up. Let's get into his head. Can we just get into his head for a second? And what is he worried about? Do you think he's worried about price?
He might be a concern, but not the most.
Look, he has a budget. I get that. We all have budgets. So I am not saying there is no price concern. I am not saying it is the main concern. Okay. And so what else? Let's you and I brainstorm this. What else is he thinking about? You're coming at him, but let's get into his world. What is he struggling with? Now, remember, so let's walk through it. One is delivery. This guy has projects that he has to deliver on. He has timelines, right?
The biggest one would be not enough capacity in-house. That's
capacity, right?
Yeah.
But also, he may not have the proper skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
So skill sets. So I'm writing these down. So I would say skill sets. So far I got delivery, timeline, and you can say it's capacity. I'll say skill sets as well. He doesn't have enough skill sets. Also, how do I know I trust you? How can I trust you? I've never worked with you, right? That's another objection I might have in my head.
Exactly. Especially with these companies, there's a lot of bad examples how it's done. So you can say like, hey, I know you've probably worked with a couple of software houses, and I know it's a pain in the ass because they've promised you something and they oversold you, and you ended up with empty hands and even with worse budget. So that's definitely something.
Right. And so then so for each one of these, delivery, capacity, skill set, trust, bad experience, we would build a response block structure around that. So for example, for working with an outside company, whether we trust you or not, I would raise the objection, said, Mr. Customer, a lot of pushback I often get is that people don't like to, by the way, give up some control when they work with outside experts. And you can actually confirm that. Am I right? And they're going to say, yeah, I am right. If I can show you how you're going to be able to control our part of that, you get the idea? It's I tee it up that way. And so this could be a longer podcast, but if you just list your 5 to 7 objections and really get inside the person's head who you're trying to sell to, then take those 5, 7. I know I'm repeating myself because I realize you got to repeat it 3 times before people really get it. And that is, you go through the objection structure that's in the book. And once you write this out, it's beautiful because, again, you'll feel the resistance go down. And the more you say it, the more you block these objections, the more it becomes real natural sounding. And that's when you really get into the smooth selling. And even engineers can do this. Yes.
Definitely. I mean, that's so powerful. One question about this is there's multiple objections. So is there a way that you can tell, like, this one is always going to come up in the beginning and there's this one at the end? We can't handle them all in one call because we don't have enough time, probably sometimes. Is there a way we can spread them out throughout? Maybe in the complex B2B, you have multiple meetings, maybe multiple decision makers, right? So is there a way you don't need to do that on one call, right?
Correct. I mean, so the answer is, like a good lawyer would say, it depends, right? And so let's say I'm on a call. Let's take different scenarios. I'm on a call one-on-one. And I know that always the biggest pushbacks I get, Victor, we just don't have time to, work with you. 2, you might be too expensive. And 3, I've never worked with you, so I don't know how this would work, right? So if I'm doing a one-on-one call, I would say, okay, those are the 3 I would prioritize. Those are the ones I know. So by the way, this is trial and error. So let's say this up front. You have to do some trial and error here. But after a while, and if you got a team of salespeople around you or engineers who are trying to sell, just have a little group meeting and ask the team, what keeps coming up all the time? So in a one-on-one conversation, for example, we know that I'm talking to a CEO, it might be one conversation. By the way, if I'm talking to an IT person, a technical person, we know there are 3 different objections now, right? There might be more technical-based objections like skill sets, capacity, and the ability to control them. Are they qualified? Are they certified? All those wonderful things. If I'm talking to, let's say, a purchasing person, they're worried about price, right? So these are different conversations we have. Even on the purchasing one, let's take the purchasing one, because again, I want to tackle the pricing issue. Even if I'm talking to purchasing, it says, well, Victor, that's too much per hour. I said, no, I can say, look, I understand that all my customers tell me it's too much per hour. That's when they raise the objection. But if I was talking to a buyer, I would say, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, I said, one of the pushbacks you're going to give me is that we're a little more expensive than the other tech houses that you're going to see around us. And there's a reason for that. Can I show you? And boom, I move right into the demo phase. And then I show them like, look, we have experts who will shorten the cycle of actual producing something, which in the end will save you more money than the per hour rate that we're charging. So it's all how you frame it. Now, let's go to a scenario where it's a meeting now. Now, in the meeting, it becomes a little more complex. There was a study done by, I think it was CSO Insights, that said on average, or was it Gartner, one of the two, that said on average at a B2B sale, enterprise level B2B sales, you have about 10 decision makers now. And it makes sense because in any solution that you have to implement, now you have to get IT people involved. Maybe the CTO is a different position. Maybe you have to even get legal involved. So there's more people buying in or have to sign off on this. So now you're in the room and you're talking to multiple buyers. You got the CEO who's worried about what? Revenue and market share. You got the CTO who's worried about compatibility, integratability, operability, blah, 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 every ability you can remember, right? The marketing people say, how are we going to market this? Salesperson says, can I sell this? The purchasing person, how can I reduce the price on this? Because it might be too expensive, not in our budget. And so that's where it becomes a little tougher to answer the question. Who do you serve first? I would serve the CEO first, which is say, here's how we can help you speed to market, right? Remember, CEOs worried about increased revenue, expand market share, which is speed to market. If you have top talent, Mr. CEO, would you agree that your product to market will be faster? Because that's one of the CEO's problems. He's trying to get product to market, but he's not getting them fast enough. So I would handle those first. And then I would move down to the CTO and knock down his problems. And his problems are all the abilities I talked about, interoperability, compatibility, so forth. That's how I would handle it.
That's excellent. You in either way you have to do this, because if you don't bring out these objections, they will talk about them, because they haven't told you about them, they still have them in their head, and they will talk about it without you in their meeting, and you're not there to kind of resolve this. So it's pointless. So you really have to bring them up. When I do calls, I have a marketing agency, so I always say.
By the way, if I can have you pause there, because what you just said is so important, so critically important. I mean, it's like one of those things you put a highlighter on. If I could put highlight your words, because some people go, they walk. I've seen people walk out of the meeting thinking, "Man, I'm glad they didn't ask me these questions," and I'm like, "No, that's the wrong mindset," because when you walk out of there, they're going to ask the questions and you're not going to be there to answer them, as you just pointed out. So being able to, have the conversations in the room while you're meeting with them, raising the objections, is a powerful strategy. Because as you well pointed out, once you leave, they're going to have the conversations anyway, and you're not going to be there. And that's not good.
Yeah, especially when you send out proposals, which I always do when I send out proposal. I have a marketing agency, I make sure I'm on that proposal call, because most people, what they do, they just send out proposal, wait for a reply. And I make sure I secure that meeting, and I'm in a meeting with them, sharing my screen, going through the proposal, so that anything that comes up, I can actually resolve there. Because if I just send it out, they never come back, or they just have to follow up like crazy.
Excellent. Yeah. I love that strategy. I've seen people I think sometimes, and these are people who are scared to sell, they'll just send the proposal, and what my line is like, look, let's schedule a call to go through the proposal. I could just send it to you, but I said, Mr. Customer, I've had enough of these calls already where you're going to have questions and we're going to back and forth. So why don't we just get on the call? I'll share my screen, go through the proposal, Perfect strategy, man. Excellent. And by the way, that shortens your sales cycle too.
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes it's really hard. I had deals when I just sent it, of course, like everybody. But when there's a chance, I always try to push for it. There's a quick opening, I try to push for it, because it will make a difference. And
I think your probability of close goes up, and I think that's powerful.
Definitely, definitely, because there's more people there who haven't heard about me, and I can sort of introduce them to me and so on. All right, so that's awesome. These blocking objections, we learned a lot, and maybe we can move to the other topic which I would like to discuss, and that's the artificial intelligence aspect in the sales world. And so you have a book on this, and there's many talks on LinkedIn about
Mhm.
replacement of SDRs, BDRs in sales process. So what's your take on the artificial intelligence in sales, and what exactly are you talking about? In which part of sales process do you think might be soon replaced by machines, or what's your take
So,
on
okay.
this?
So I cover this in the book, the Sales Ex Machina.
Hmm.
And by the way, are you doing a video of this
Yep,
or audio? That's the book,
both.
right? So
Got
that's the
it.
Sales Ex Machina book. And so in the Sales Ex Machina or Ex Machina, by the way, the Ex Machina, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase. People ask me where the title came from. There's a phrase called Deus Ex Machina, which means God is in the machine. So
Hmm.
back in the old days, when they couldn't explain why a piece of technology worked, they say God is in the machine. That was one way of. There's other definitions of it, but that's one. So when I said instead of God being in the machine, I look at a CRM as the machine,
Hmm.
and I say sales are in the machine because everything's moving towards a CRM. The biggest shift we're seeing is that we used to think of a CRM as Big Brother. Somebody's watching us.
Hmm.
Managers want to monitor us. So we have to shift that mindset that the CRM today, and this is the phrase, is augmenting your sales ability. And the key word is augment. It makes you better, right? It's almost like a superpower, makes you better. So when I'm asked a question about what jobs will be impacted, it's really the wrong question. Here's the right question I cover in the book. Let's take a BDR, SDR, doesn't matter. Even a salesperson, account manager, doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Take any job you want within the sales realm, and then let's say it's an SDR or a BDR, and then ask yourself, what tasks do they have to perform every day to do their job? What tasks do they have to perform every day to do their job? And let's say if we were to list everything out, everything from making the calls, obviously, setting up meetings, entering things into a calendar, rescheduling, checking, verifying, generating reports, whatever it may be. That's the list, right? Where artificial intelligence kicks in, it's going to take those repetitive, mundane tasks and replace those. So you only focus on high leverage activities. So in other words, let's say, for example, and here was this is what generated the book. It's a fascinating study. Big healthcare company. I was doing a presentation for them, and here's what they did. Let's say I'm trying to sell you, right? What they did was they recorded our conversation. Now, I work at a call center. We have 100 people in the call center, right? With me so far, 100 people in the call center. Each makes 100 calls a day. If I do my numbers right, I think that's 10,000 calls. But let's just focus on me. I just made 100 calls in one day. I closed 20% of those deals. Now, if I closed the deal, I sold them something or I got the meeting to advance the sale.
Hmm.
Take your pick, right? Now, I have 80 left that I didn't close. What do I do? What do I do with them, right? People say, well, I don't know, Victor, you kind of get a gut feeling who you should call back. Well, remove the gut feeling piece. And what happens is that the AI, the artificial intelligence, can now record our conversation. It will then split the track and it will analyze the potential customer's conversation, what they said, how they said it, how often they said it, what questions they asked. And the machine will now prioritize all your leads, all 80 of them, in order of importance for you. So no more is there guessing about who I should call back. In fact, the system will actually say, these 20 are not worth calling back. Okay, so we're down to 60. Now look at these 60. It prioritizes the 60. And then it'll say something like this. Now this customer, here's the inside piece. Here's how you sell them. So it's doing that for you. So you see how it's augmenting your ability. One more. I was the salesperson. I made the call. The artificial intelligence, the machine learning programming would also look at my language, what I said to you, how I responded to your question, and it will highlight what training modules I really need to go back and study because I didn't answer it properly. And you see what I mean? It really augments your ability to sell better, prioritizes the leads for you. And so again, it's going to eliminate all the mundane tasks because at the end of the day, people buy from people, especially in a complex environment. If it's a commodity transaction, something simple, I want to buy a book, I don't need a salesperson. But if I'm buying a $300,000 system, I want to talk to a person to feel good about this.
Yeah. I wish I had that AI when I was doing 120 calls per day, like 4 years ago. I think there was no prioritization.
Right.
But I think you're talking about Gong, right? Is that the company Gong? .io?
No. This was by the way, Gong has some great stuff. It's gong.io. Go check out. I interviewed the guy from Gong. Oh, I forgot his name. He's gonna kill me. But anyway, so it's on my podcast. I have a podcast called AI in Sales Podcast. It's a great podcast where I interview people in AI. The company I'm talking about was actually Salesforce.com and also Einstein. Salesforce has Einstein, IBM has Watson.
Yeah.
So those are the two I cover in the book. And when you look at what, let's say, Gong is doing, they may be using some of those platforms as well. I'm sure they're applying some of their own language or API to it, but I'm sure they're doing that. There's so many companies out there doing what they call natural language processing, which is analyzing, context and text just for sentiment and intent to buy.
Yeah. And I think this can be also applied if you're a small company. I mean, for example, what we do, I have, we have SDRs, BDRs, and what I do, they focus on crafting custom lines for each prospect. So even though we send cold emails, they are customized. We cannot send just blast because nobody responds back. So that's high quality task. I would say this is the most important part of their job. The other stuff we automate, like we have a software that sends these emails. We have a freelancers who supply the data. Everything is done, so they can only focus on those things and then some other stuff. But this is like it can be also applied if you don't have like a huge sales force. If you're an agency or if you're a SaaS company and you have a few sales reps, you can still make this happen, I would say.
Well, that's why, and I cover this in the book. It's again an excellent point you bring up because people see this and they go, "This one is too science fiction." Two, if it's not science fiction, I'm too small. The answer is you're not too small. That's why if you think about Amazon, they came out with AWS, I think it's Amazon Web Service, where they have all these machine learning modules that you can use for a low monthly fee of whatever it is. So anybody can use this. You don't have to hire 20 data scientists. You don't have to do that anymore. So you can use, Amazon has done something interesting and Google's moving in that direction also, is that they've commoditized machine learning. And if you're not getting what I'm saying right now, look at it this way. Imagine you have a smartphone and imagine you got apps. Now imagine those apps are actually machine learning modules, and all you have to hit is click one open, import your data, and it'll spit out whatever you want, almost like a GPS routing map. And that's how much it's becoming a commodity, and anybody can use it.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so you're not talking about replacing these salespeople. You're talking about basically using technology to be more effective or augment, right?
Yeah.
Got it.
I think, we have computers used to assist us, and now AI is going to augment us and make us that much more efficient, that much better. Now, will some positions be eliminated? Of course. If they're routine and mundane, you know what I mean, that require no brain power, yeah, you're out. But again, as you move up the complexity chart, I think it becomes harder to replace somebody, so you just augment them.
Yeah, I mean, we try to even have a fully automated process for data, for just listing companies, people in spreadsheets and everything. It's even there's so many softwares out there that do that. It's still not 100% sure. There's still need for a freelancer to come in and at least replace 30% of those people, which makes a difference with the outreach. So it's still not there even at the very simple stage. And I can't even see it at the BDR level. And then when we move up to account executive, and it's still years, I think, it's just my opinion because I'm in it every day. And
I think we're seeing, or not seeing, well, most people don't see it, but I think there's an exponential growth in just even in the natural language processing. I remember Google announced that their word error rate is, I think, around 4% now, which is incredible. It used to be like a 25% error rate, which means the more we use these machines to talk into them, ask for commands and everything, Google is working on something. They may have it already where in a room of 6 people, it can actually tell you who's having what conversation and actually distinguish them. with a high level of
Okay.
accuracy. I mean, that's where the stuff is moving. So I think we've reached a point where we're hitting that exponential inflection point where, okay, all the slow stuff is gone. Now it's going to start picking up speed. So I think it's going to get interesting in the next few years.
Yeah. So, is there any technology that is exciting to you in the sales space? Any kind of company in the AI space that is exciting, or some company you follow, except
There,
Google and.
there's a technology that a lot of people don't talk about, and maybe you've heard of beacon technology.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beacon technology is basically it's a Bluetooth low energy device, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you do, give you the simplest example: you walk into a retail store, right? And you put this device on that rack. And let's say it's all sweaters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when somebody approaches it, if you have permission on their app because they go to that store a lot, it knows you're there and it'll do a push notification and say, hey, these sweaters are on sale for 20%. Just use this code when you walk up to the counter. And you can place these beacons all over a store so you can see where people are dwelling the most, where they're staying the most,
Mm-hmm.
what racks are attractive, which ones are not. Now, zoom out. I have to do a presentation next week on AI and the new digital billboards that are out there. So
Mm-hmm.
how everything's going digital now? That is the new frontier of how everything's changing, because not only are they using location parameters to identify who's in the location of the billboard, but it will change based on the demographic that's in front of the billboard.
That's really good. Is there like
Yeah.
a face recognition there? Because
Yeah, well, it has several things. One, it has not only facial recognition, it'll recognize cars, for example, driving patterns, but even if it's one of the big billboards, again, it's using these beacons to say, hey, if I pulse, I know that phone you have is in the area.
mm-hmm.
And what it does, it looks at all the phones that are in the area through some crypto keys and says, hey, these are guys between 25 and 35. Maybe we should show some sports stuff here, or more ladies, whatever it may be. So all this
Mm-hmm.
is like really, it's how do you put your arms around all this data and make it useful at the moment, at the point of engagement. So to me, beacons are an exciting technology, and also digital media billboards and what's
Mm-hmm.
happening with that. I think that's exciting.
So those are kind of IoT devices, right? These beacons, if I understand it.
That's another way of looking at them. Yeah, because they're not transmitting or capturing data per se. They're not capturing any data. They're just telling you that it's almost like the analogy they use. It's a lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it says this phone has wandered near this beacon. Again, the beacon doesn't store any data, but the phone says, hey, I just spotted a beacon, and it has the location of the beacon, so
Mm-hmm.
and then it pushes something. So it's almost like an IoT device, but it stores no data or captures the data.
Got it.
Yeah. It's
Is
almost
there?
like putting sensors around your house.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so maybe we can move to the topic of sales, and maybe you can share with us what are some biggest myths you see right now online people share that are just not true about sales. Is there anything like that?
There's a lot of myths out there about sales. Again, depend on the spectrum of pricing, right? I'm not a fan of I believe that the world has changed because of the internet. We all know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before the internet, blocking objections was the way to go. But today we have consumers who are smart. I think Google did a study years ago that says people look to 10 sources of information before reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
10 sources. That's a lot of sources. Some people say they're 57 to 80% into the buying cycle. That means they're already pretty much sure what they're going to buy. So if you try to approach them with the famous ABC, always be closing crap, it isn't going to work. And so what customers want today is for you to guide them and educate them through the process, help them make decisions. And this is where I truly believe that salespeople, for the first time in a long time, are now the true differentiators. Let me say that again, because I really want people to hear this. Salespeople, for the first time in a long time, are the true differentiators. Here's what I mean. We've reached the point of the quality of quality. So what I mean the quality of quality is that everything has the same quality, right? And then we reached a point of parity where every product is almost the same. Well, if every product is almost the same, the quality is the same, the service is the same, what's different? What's different let's talk about a B2B sales. It's the salesperson that sells the product and knows how to position it in the context of how the customer will use it or how they need it. See,
Mm-hmm.
that's an art. That's not a science. You can't datify that. And so if I'm a salesperson, what I want to do is learn the product, learn the market, and learn the application, how they can save money, make money, or expand market share. And it is the salesperson's job to do just that.
Yeah. I now have 4 questions for you. It's called the Notorious 4, and it's basically true or false answers.
Oh, man, I hate this. Go ahead.
It's just 4. It's fine.
Okay.
So, first one, cold email is a spam. You agree or not?
Yes.
Okay. The second one, in 10 years, AI will replace B2B sales reps.
No. False.
Third one, everybody can learn to sell. Salespeople aren't born.
Oh, I agree. 100% true.
And the last one, being able to sell is more important than your product.
True.
All right.
Any controversies there? Did I do any controversy? Maybe the first one?
No, I mean, we use email, so it's fine. I take it lightly. But
no. So let's go through it. So the cold email ones, it is spam, because if we define spam as unwanted email, right, then it is. Technically it is. But the intent is different, I think, because it's like, hopefully you've done it. Look, if you've done enough market research and this is your specific sector, you could argue that it's not spam. It's targeted, creativity. Either way you're looking at, you're interrupting somebody's day.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So maybe a few other questions. Do you have any favorite entrepreneur who you follow or somebody you admire as an entrepreneur? It doesn't have to be somebody famous, but somebody you kind of follow around.
The person there's a couple of people I follow. If you go to my Twitter account, which is Victor Antonio, you'll find the people I admire the most, because I only follow like 12 people. So it's really simple.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing is, I've always viewed Twitter, if you're going to use it correctly. So if you're going to follow, don't follow somebody just because they followed you. Follow somebody because you're trying to get something. So those, I think there's 12 if you check. Those 12 change depending on what I need to learn, right? And so, there's a couple of guys on there. I like a guy by the name of Tim Reister. He's a great sales guy. He works for a company called Corporate Visions. I love his stuff. There's a guy named Matt Dixon. He wrote the book. He was one of the authors of the book, The Challenger Sale. If you've not, by the way, if you're in the B2B space and if you've not read The Challenger Sale, you should read The Challenger Sale. They did two books, The Challenger Customer and then The Effortless Experience. These are 3 books that are like the trifecta, of what I call real empirical studies on how people buy. And that's where I come from. I don't like the anecdotal stuff. People who just like, yeah, you can go out there, you can sell, you can be the greatest. I'm like, no, show me the data. I'm an engineer, so I'm always like, show me the data. And so those are people I follow. And then recently, just a side note, I like Jordan Peterson. He's the guy who's a
Wolf of Wall Street.
No, not
Jordan Belfort. Sorry.
No. Yeah, no, Belfort I don't follow. Okay. The Jordan Peterson, I got Dr. Jordan Peterson. He just wrote the 12 Rules of Life. One of the reasons I like watching him, because people go, what does it have to do with sales? It has nothing to do with sales directly, but his ability to really dig deep into a question and analyze it is powerful. And I think if you have that critical thinking aspect, where you're asking key critical questions to your clients and you're breaking it down. Like, he's a clinical psychologist, so he's trying to get to the root of the problem of why people are unhappy or not doing things. If you think about it, salespeople are somewhat the same way. You try to ask questions to understand, why don't you want to move forward? What's holding you back, right? And so those are the people I follow.
Yeah, I've read the book, so it's a really good one, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I just ordered it. I didn't read the book. I've been watching his videos for the last month. And I said, you know what, let me get the book finally.
Got it. So what's the latest book you've read? Because I've listened, I think, yesterday to your podcast about quota and salespeople, something like that, where you mentioned that you've read some books. So I don't know if that's your recent book you've read, but is there any book you recommend?
The Times Square is the one. I'm trying to remember. Everywhere is Times Square. That's where I'm really interested in beacons and billboard technology. So Everywhere is Times Square, I think, is the name of the book. Everywhere is Times Square.
All right.
It's an okay book. It's an okay book. It has great data. I'm not going to fully go, yes, go out and get it. But if you want data points for what's happening in the market, in the industry, what they call out-of-home marketing, billboards, retail signs, and all that, that's a great book to find some great data. So I tried to kind of just read different books. A week ago, I was reading a NLP book, Neuro-Linguistic Persuasion. The week before that, I don't know. I just read books, man.
Yeah,
I like books. I think if you're not reading at least one book a month, you're robbing yourself.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful books I've read is List of Seneca. It's like ancient book, 3,000 years ago.
Went back.
Yeah, but the stuff he's saying, it's so relevant. It's like unbelievable.
What's the title?
I think it's called A List to a King, and it's done by Seneca. He's this famous philosopher.
Yep,
he lived
I know who he
with
is.
Caesar. Super smart guy. He was super rich, and then he died. But the book is, I've never read anything like that. So
I'm gonna look it up. Somebody recommended the writings of Marcus Aurelius.
It's pretty good as well.
Yeah. And so I've not. I got the audiobook for that, so that's gonna be my travel companion. But I'll look it up.
Do you have any favorite apps you use on daily basis? It can be sales related or just like a Slack channel or something like that.
No, I don't have any favorite apps. I'm pretty vanilla. If you know what I mean. I use most of the Google apps, like the calendars, your Gmail, stuff like that. If you ask me as far as productivity, no, I don't have any apps. I have a cool app I use for my podcast, which is one called BossJock, BossJock, which is probably the easiest way to record a podcast because you can integrate the music in easily and you don't have to do any editing and the podcast is done.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't use a lot. I just use the basic apps.
Got it.
Sorry, I'm boring, man. I'm boring. What's your favorite app right now?
I think Slack. It's just because I'm always there. So I think Slack, nothing fancy. Yeah. So I have my last question. It's kind of a story. So here we go. Basically, imagine that you have just got a check from IRS and you realize that you owe the government all your money you've ever earned, like everything. It's going to be taken away in 1 week. So you're going to lose the house, everything, every asset. But you have a friend who's a tech entrepreneur, no sales background, tech entrepreneur, has a great idea. He's trying to sell it and he has a big presentation tomorrow. So you have 1 day. He hires you and he tells you, you're going to get 50% of this sale if you train me in 1 day how to sell. And you have 1 day to do that. What would be your top 3 things to teach him? Because this deal can help you pay the debt. So what 3 things would you teach a person who has never been in sales?
Oh my God, that is so good. That is so good. That is so good. I hate you, but that's so good. The objection blocking would be number 1. That would be the one. So I would start out with that one. The last one I would start, the third thing I would say, I'm skipping number 2 for now because I'm trying to think. The third one for sure I would make sure is that you got to ask for the money. You got to ask for the deal. Okay. In other words, you can't leave that room without closing the deal. So you got to ask for the close. You'd be amazed at, I think the number was like 80-something% of people never ask for the sale. Right. So that, if I'm talking about it's guerrilla marketing. And then the second thing I think I would tell them to do is every opportunity you have in that presentation to let them put their hands on the app and play with it, do it. So if I can if I can let you play with it, block your objections and ask for the sale, I think I'll close that deal. And by the way, the reason I say let them play with it is because when I was selling technology products, I remember one time I just held my marker up because I had a guy who he was like a VP or something. He's like, Victor, I'm not sure you understand our situation here, what we're trying to do with this wireless network, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, do me a favor. And I said, I held out the marker and I said, why don't you come up here and draw with me and help me understand? So he gets up, he comes up, he starts drawing. And then I said, well, what about this? And I drew something. And he says, yeah, no, you would do that right here. You do that. And then by the time we were done, we're like, so that's the network you would want. I said, we can build that. And he said, that's what we're looking for. And it was like, the more you can engage them like that, the chances of them closing go up.
Creating
those are my
experience.
3.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. So thank you very much, Victor. This was really educational. I believe everybody got enough value from Victor. He's a great guy. So make sure to check him out. Where can people go to see more of your work? Your ebook is going to be in the description, but what else you have going on?
My website is victorantonio.com to see who I am, what I do, but really go on YouTube. I have over 1,200 videos on there and podcasts. So, just type in Victor Antonio and then check out my Sales Influence podcast. The Sales Influence podcast is cool because there's only, as you know, they're only like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, people don't want long stories. They just say, give me what I want and I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much, Victor. This was really awesome. Hope that we will have you here maybe in a couple of months or something like that. And really cool. So thank you, and let's be in touch then.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Appreciate the exchange.